My daughter-in-law counted my wife's funeral flowers while calculating her inheritance. I'm Richard Taylor, and I just discovered what greed looks like in a $2,000 funeral dress. 3 hours after we lowered Marie into the ground, Stephanie cornered me at the lawyer's office with spreadsheets and ownership transfer documents already printed. Now that she's gone, everything goes to us, right? The word us hit me like a slap. Not Brandon, not the family. Us, meaning her. She'd been planning this conversation while I was planning a burial. While I was choosing flowers, she was choosing which employees to fire first. But here's what Stephanie didn't know. For 2 years, I'd been quietly signing papers of my own, documents she'd never seen, agreements that would make her spreadsheets completely worthless. Because sometimes the most devastating response to cruelty isn't anger. It's preparation. I just looked at her and said we'd discuss everything properly at Thursday's board meeting. Something in my voice made her confident smirk freeze. For the first time since I'd known her, Stephanie looked uncertain. If this story hits close to home for you, please hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know what city you're watching from, because what happened in that boardroom 48 hours later is something I never thought I'd have to do. But when someone mistakes your grief for weakness, sometimes you have to show them exactly how strong you've been all along. Let me tell you how my own family started treating me like I was incompetent the moment Marie's heart stopped beating. Brandon, my son, showed up to the funeral with this folder. Corporate restructuring plans, he called them. His wife Stephanie stood behind him in her $2,000 black dress, taking notes on her phone while people were still offering condolences. They weren't even trying to hide it. "Dad, we need to talk about the business," Brandon said during the reception. Right there, next to the casserole table my neighbors had prepared. Stephanie has some ideas about modernization. Ideas. That's what they called it. See, they looked at Taylor Manufacturing and saw an old man running an outdated operation. 47 employees making parts for agricultural equipment. Nothing glamorous, nothing that would impress Stephanie's friends at their country club. They didn't know our annual revenue hit $2.3 million last year. They didn't know we'd never missed a payroll in 3 decades. They didn't know that Tommy Wilson, my floor supervisor, just bought his first house because of the profit-sharing program I'd quietly implemented 5 years ago. All they saw was me in my old Ford pickup, wearing work boots to board meetings. "This place needs a complete overhaul," Stephanie announced the next morning, strutting through the factory floor in heels that clicked against concrete like bullets. "Half these positions could be automated, the rest outsourced." She pointed at Mrs. Henderson, who'd been running our quality control department for 15 years. "What's her education level? Any certifications?" "She's got 30 years of manufacturing experience," I said quietly. "Experience doesn't mean efficiency, Richard." Stephanie always used my full name when she wanted to sound authoritative. "I have an MBA from State University. I understand optimization. State University, a decent school, sure. But she'd never operated a single piece of machinery, never met a production deadline with equipment breaking down and customers calling every hour. The employees started looking at me differently after that visit. Not disrespectful, they'd never be that, but worried. Like they were watching their future get decided by people who saw them as line items on a spreadsheet. Brandon tried to smooth things over. "Dad, we're not saying you did anything wrong. We just think fresh perspectives could help." Fresh perspectives. That's rich, coming from someone who'd worked exactly 0 days in the family business. "Your mother and I built this from nothing," I told him. "Started in our garage with a $2,000 loan." "That was then," Stephanie interrupted. "This is now. Sentiment doesn't pay dividends." She was wrong about that, but they had no idea what I'd been planning. You see, while they were making assumptions about my capabilities, I'd been having quiet conversations with people who actually mattered. Margaret Brown, my CFO, had been with me for 18 years. She understood what this company really meant. "The employees have been asking questions," Margaret told me privately. "They're scared." That's when I knew I had to act. These weren't just jobs we were talking about. Tommy Wilson had 3 kids. Aurora Martinez was supporting her elderly parents. Jake Thompson was 6 months away from retirement, but they had no idea what was coming. The papers Margaret had been preparing for the past 2 years were about to change everything. The employee stock ownership plan we'd structured in complete secrecy, the succession documents that would transfer control exactly where it belonged, to the people who'd earned it. I just had to wait for the right moment to show my family what loyalty actually looked like. If I did nothing, here's what would happen. 47 families would lose their livelihoods to make 2 people richer. Let me be specific about what was at stake. Taylor Manufacturing employed people who'd been with me for decades, not because they couldn't find other jobs, but because we'd built something special together. Something Stephanie and Brandon would destroy in their first quarter of optimization. Tommy Wilson started as an 18-year-old apprentice. Now he's 45, supervising 12 people, and his oldest daughter just got accepted to nursing school. The profit-sharing program I'd implemented meant he'd earned an extra $38,000 last year. Under Stephanie's plan, his position would be redundant. Aurora Martinez ran our shipping department with precision that would make FedEx jealous. She'd worked through night shifts when her husband was deployed overseas, never missing a deadline. Her salary supported her parents' medical bills and her 2 teenagers' college funds. Stephanie wanted to outsource the entire department to a third-party logistics company. These weren't abstract concepts. These were real people with real lives who'd invested their time, their skills, and their trust in what we'd built together. But the stakes went deeper than individual employees. Marie and I had spent 42 years creating something that mattered. Not just a business, but a community. When Jake Thompson's wife died of cancer 3 years ago, we didn't just give him time off. We organized meal trains, helped with funeral expenses, made sure his kids had Christmas presents. When the Martinez family lost their house in a fire, our employees raised $15,000 in 2 weeks. That's not something you'll find in Stephanie's MBA textbooks. The financial stakes were enormous, too. Our company was worth approximately $4.8 million in total assets. The building, the equipment, the contracts, the reputation, all of it built through 3 decades of steady growth. Under normal inheritance laws, Brandon would receive controlling interest, and Stephanie had made it crystal clear what that meant. Immediate restructuring to maximize short-term profits before selling to the highest bidder. Industrial real estate in this area is worth a fortune, she'd told me during one of her optimization presentations. We could liquidate the whole operation and invest the proceeds in a diversified portfolio. Liquidate. That's what she called 30 years of my life. But here's what really kept me awake at night. If I stayed silent, I'd be betraying every person who'd trusted me to protect what we'd built together. Margaret had shown me the documentation 3 months before Marie's diagnosis, the employee stock ownership plan we'd been quietly developing. The legal structure that would transfer 75% ownership to the workers who'd actually earned it. It's completely legal, she'd explained. Structured properly for tax benefits, each qualified employee would receive shares based on tenure and performance. The numbers were staggering. Tommy Wilson would own approximately $180,000 in company stock. Aurora Martinez would get $160,000. Even our newest employee, hired just last year, would receive a $40,000 stake. But implementing the plan required perfect timing and absolute secrecy. If Brandon and Stephanie discovered what we were planning, they'd find ways to challenge it legally, claim I was mentally incompetent due to grief, question my decision-making capacity, tie everything up in court for years while the employees suffered. No, this had to be done right. The documents Margaret showed me changed everything. Not just ownership transfer, but protection for every employee currently on payroll. Guaranteed positions for 5 years minimum, healthcare benefits maintained, the profit-sharing program locked in permanently. Your family won't be left with nothing, Margaret had assured me. The 25% remaining shares, plus the life insurance policies, would still provide a substantial inheritance. Substantial, but not controlling. Not enough to destroy what 47 families depended on. Still, the decision wasn't easy. Brandon was my son. Despite everything, I loved him. But love doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior. Stephanie had made the stakes clear with her cold calculation at that conference table. She saw dollar signs where I saw dignity. She saw inefficiency where I saw loyalty. She saw opportunity where I saw responsibility. The choice was simple. Protect my legacy or protect my employees. There really wasn't a choice at all. The board meeting I'd scheduled for Thursday would determine the future of everything Marie and I had built. Either our employees would become owners of their own workplace, or they'd become casualties of corporate greed. But they had no idea what was coming. The first real confrontation happened Wednesday morning, exactly 24 hours before the board meeting that would change everything. Stephanie walked into my office without knocking. She never knocked. "Richard, we need to discuss your decision-making process." I looked up from the quarterly reports Margaret had prepared. "Good morning to you too, Stephanie." "This isn't a social call. She sat down without being invited, crossing her legs and pulling out her phone. I've been reviewing your recent business decisions, and frankly, I'm concerned. Concerned about what? The profit-sharing program, for starters. You're giving away company money to employees who didn't invest anything to earn it. I set down my reading glasses. Those employees invested 30 years of their lives. Time isn't capital, Richard. Capital is capital. She scrolled through something on her screen. Last year alone, you distributed $437,000 in profit sharing. That's money that should have gone to actual shareholders. Like who? Like family. Like the people who will inherit this business. The entitlement in her voice was breathtaking. She was already spending money from my grave. And another thing, she continued, this healthcare plan you provide is completely unnecessary. Basic coverage would save us over $200,000 annually. Us, she kept saying us. Mrs. Henderson has diabetes, I said calmly. Her insulin costs $800 a month. That's not our responsibility. It is mine. Stephanie sighed like I was a child who couldn't understand basic math. Richard, sentiment is expensive. These people work for wages. Anything beyond that is charity. These people have names, and these names are costing you money you could be investing wisely. She leaned forward, trying to look sincere. Brandon and I want what's best for the company, for the family. What exactly do you think is best? Her eyes lit up. This was the conversation she'd been waiting for. First, we eliminate redundant positions. Tommy Wilson's supervisory role, for instance. Half those floor workers could manage themselves. Tommy's been here 27 years, which means he's expensive and set in his ways. We replace him with someone younger, cheaper, more adaptable. I could feel my jaw tightening. What else? Outsource shipping entirely. Aurora Martinez's whole department becomes unnecessary. That saves us 3 salaries plus benefits. Aurora's never missed a deadline. The third-party logistics company I've researched has a 96% on-time delivery rate, better than Aurora's 94%. She had statistics ready. She'd been planning this for months. And the biggest change, Stephanie continued, is automation. Half the production floor could be replaced with modern equipment. Initial investment of $800,000, but we'd save over $400,000 annually in labor costs. That equipment would eliminate 23 jobs. 23 unnecessary positions, she corrected. Plus, we could relocate to a smaller facility. This building is worth at least $2 million. We could operate from a space 1/3 this size. I sat back in my chair. And the people? What about them? The people who've worked here for decades, who've built their lives around this place. Stephanie shrugged. They'll find other jobs. The economy's good right now. Tommy Wilson is 45 years old. Who's going to hire a 45-year-old supervisor? That's not our problem to solve. Our problem. There was that word again. Richard, she said, softening her voice like she was explaining something to a confused elderly relative. I understand this is emotional for you. These people feel like family. But business isn't about feelings. What's it about? Results, profit, growth, maximizing return on investment. Whose investment? The shareholders, the family, the people who actually own the company. I looked at her for a long moment. And who owns the company, Stephanie? Well, technically you do right now. But after, she gestured vaguely. When the inheritance is settled, Brandon will inherit controlling interest. Will he? It wasn't a question. Something in my tone made her pause. Richard, you're not seriously considering leaving the business to anyone else, are you? I'm considering a lot of things. Because that would be, she searched for the right word, irresponsible. Brandon is your son. This business should stay in the family. Should it? Of course it should. Family businesses are passed down through generations. It's tradition. So is earning what you inherit. Stephanie's face hardened. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm having a board meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. Margaret will send you the details. A board meeting about what? The future of this company. Richard, as future shareholders, Brandon and I should have input on any major decisions. Should you? She was getting frustrated with my responses. Good. Yes, we should. We have a right to know what you're planning. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. That's not an answer. I picked up my reading glasses and returned to the quarterly reports. It's the only answer you're getting today. Richard, goodbye, Stephanie. She stood up slowly, realizing she'd been dismissed. This conversation isn't over. No, I agreed, not looking up from the papers. It isn't. She walked to the door, then turned back. You know Brandon loves you, right? He's trying to help. Help with what? Help you make the right decisions for everyone involved. I finally looked up. I am making the right decisions for everyone involved. I hope so, she said, but her voice suggested she doubted my competence. After she left, I sat in the quiet for a few minutes. Then I picked up the phone and called Margaret. Tomorrow's going to be interesting, I told her. Everything's ready, Margaret replied. The documents are signed and notarized. Good, because Stephanie just made it very clear what she thinks of our employees. What did she say? She called them unnecessary. Margaret was quiet for a moment. They're about to find out how necessary they really are. That afternoon, I took a walk through the factory floor, something I'd been doing every day for 30 years, but today felt different. The employees were working with their usual precision, but I could sense the underlying tension. Word had gotten around about Stephanie's visits, about her questions, about her measuring tape and her efficiency studies. Tommy Wilson was training a new machinist on the industrial lathe. Patient, methodical, the way he'd been teaching people for decades. When he saw me approaching, he wiped his hands on his coveralls. Mr. Taylor, he said, nodding respectfully. Got a minute? We walked to a quieter corner near the loading dock. People are worried, Tommy said quietly, about changes coming. What kind of changes? Your daughter-in-law was asking questions yesterday about productivity metrics, about how many parts each person produces per hour. I'd heard about this. Stephanie had been walking around with a clipboard, timing tasks, calculating efficiency ratios. She asked Aurora how many packages her team ships daily, Tommy continued. Then she wanted to know why we need 3 people when automated systems could handle the same volume. What did Aurora tell her? That automated systems don't catch quality control issues, don't notice when a customer's address is wrong, don't build relationships with drivers who prioritize our deliveries because they know we're reliable. Tommy paused, studying my face. But I don't think she was interested in those details. No, I don't think she was either. Mr. Taylor, can I ask you something? Always. Are we going to be okay? I looked at this man who'd been with me for 27 years, who'd started as a teenager and was now training the next generation, who'd bought his first house with profit-sharing money and was sending his daughter to college. Tommy, what do you think this company is worth? Sir, if someone offered to buy Taylor Manufacturing tomorrow, what would you say it's worth? He thought for a moment. Well, the equipment's probably worth $800,000. The building, maybe $2 million. The contracts and reputation. He shrugged. Hard to put a number on that. What about the people? The people. The knowledge. The experience. The relationships. What's that worth? Tommy smiled slightly. You can't really put a price on that, can you? Actually, I said, you can. And it's higher than most people think. I could see he was curious, but I wasn't ready to explain yet. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'm having a board meeting, I told him. Important decisions about the company's future. Yes, sir. Margaret mentioned something about that. Good, because some of those decisions will affect everyone who works here. Should we be worried? I looked around the factory floor, at the machinery humming efficiently, at the employees who knew their jobs so well they could run operations blindfolded, at the quality control standards that had earned us contracts with companies 3 times our size. No, I said, you shouldn't be worried. But things are going to change. Things are going to change. As I walked back to my office, I passed Margaret coming out of the conference room. She was carrying a stack of manila folders. The board packets are ready, she said quietly. All the documentation? Everything. The stock ownership plan, the transfer agreements, the employee contracts. And the lawyers have reviewed everything? Stephen Johnson signed off on all the legal structures yesterday. It's ironclad. Margaret glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Richard, are you sure about this? Once we present these documents tomorrow, there's no going back. There's no going back anyway, I said. Stephanie made that clear this morning. What did she say? She called our employees unnecessary. Margaret's jaw tightened. I see. The question isn't whether change is coming. The question is who's going to control that change. And your answer is? The people who actually built this place. That evening, I sat in my empty house looking at photos of Marie and me at various company events over the years. Christmas parties, retirement celebrations. The day we moved into our current facility. In every photo, we were surrounded by employees. Not just workers, but people who'd become family. Tomorrow, they'd discover they were more than family. They were owners. But first, I had to survive one more confrontation with my actual family. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. Brandon showed up at 8:30, which was unusual. He typically avoided the factory, claiming the noise gave him headaches. But today he walked straight to my office with purpose in his step. "Dad, we need to talk before this board meeting." "Good morning, son. Stephanie told me about your conversation yesterday. She's concerned about your decision-making." I looked up from the financial reports Margaret had prepared for the meeting. "Is she? She thinks you might be making emotional choices instead of business choices." "Such as?" Brandon sat down, looking uncomfortable. "The profit-sharing program. The healthcare benefits? He gestured vaguely. "The way you treat employees like family instead of staff." "How should I treat them?" "Professionally, with appropriate boundaries." Appropriate boundaries. I wondered where he'd learned that phrase. "Dad, I love you, but Stephanie has experience with corporate restructuring. She knows how to maximize efficiency." Efficiency for who? For everyone. Higher profits mean better job security. Does it? Of course it does. When a company is more profitable, it's more stable. I set down my papers. "Brandon, let me ask you something. How many hours have you worked in this factory?" "That's not really relevant." "How many?" "Dad, I chose a different career path." "That doesn't mean I don't understand business." "It means you don't understand this business." "I understand numbers. I understand profit margins. I understand return on investment." "Do you understand Tommy Wilson?" "What? Do you understand why Tommy Wilson has worked here for 27 years? Do you understand why Aurora Martinez turns down offers from larger companies? Do you understand why our employee turnover rate is less than 5% when the industry average is 30%? Brandon looked confused. "Good management, I suppose. Good relationships." "Dad, relationships don't show up on balance sheets." "Don't they?" Before he could answer, Stephanie appeared in the doorway. She dressed for battle today. Sharp business suit, heels that announced her presence, leather portfolio that probably cost more than most of our employees made in a week. "Richard, Brandon," she said, nodding to each of us, "I hope we can have a productive discussion today." "About what?" "About the future. About making necessary changes to ensure this company's profitability." She sat down without being invited, spreading papers across my desk. "I've prepared a comprehensive restructuring plan," she announced. "Initial implementation could begin next week." "Next week. The sooner we act, the sooner we'll see results." She opened her portfolio with theatrical precision. "First phase, eliminate redundant supervisory positions. Tommy Wilson, Jake Thompson, and Aurora Martinez would be offered early retirement packages. They're not retirement age. They're expensive and set in their ways. We replace them with younger, more adaptable employees at 60% of current salary. More adaptable to what? To modern business practices, to efficiency standards, to change." Stephanie pulled out a spreadsheet covered in highlighted numbers. Phase 2, automation of production floor. We install 3 new machines that can do the work of 15 people. Which 15 people? Does it matter? The point is cost reduction. I looked at my son. "Brandon, do you agree with this?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Stephanie's done the research, Dad. The numbers make sense." "What about the people? What about them? The 15 people who lose their jobs? What happens to them?" Stephanie answered. "They find new employment. That's how the economy works." "Where?" "Wherever there are openings. That's not our concern." "It's not our concern." "No, it's not. Our concern is maximizing shareholder value." "And who are the shareholders?" "The family. Brandon specifically after the inheritance is settled." I leaned back in my chair. "I see. Richard," Stephanie continued, "I know this seems harsh, but sentiment is a luxury successful businesses can't afford." "Is it?" "Yes. Every dollar we spend on unnecessary benefits is a dollar that could be invested in growth, or taken as profit." "Exactly. For the shareholders, for the family." I studied her face. No emotion, no recognition that we were talking about real people with real lives, just numbers on a spreadsheet. "Stephanie, let me ask you something. What do you think built this company?" "Hard work and good business decisions." "Whose hard work?" "Yours, obviously, and Marie's. Anyone else?" She looked puzzled. "Well, employees contributed, I suppose, but that's what they were paid for." "So their contribution ends with their paycheck?" "Of course, that's how employment works." "And loyalty? What's that worth?" Loyalty is nice, but it doesn't pay bills. Doesn't it? Stephanie was getting impatient. Richard, you're being deliberately obtuse. This is basic business theory. Whose theory? Every successful corporation operates on these principles, such as maximize efficiency, minimize costs, optimize shareholder returns. At any cost? At whatever cost necessary. Brandon finally spoke up. Dad, I think what Stephanie's trying to say is that we need to modernize our approach. Modernize how? Make decisions based on data instead of emotions. Such as? Stephanie jumped back in. Such as the decision to give Tommy Wilson's daughter a $5,000 scholarship last year. That wasn't a business expense. That was charity. Tommy's daughter is studying engineering. So she might come back and work here someday. That's a terrible return on investment. $5,000 for a maybe? It's called building relationships. It's called poor financial planning. I looked at both of them. My son, who'd never spent a day learning the business he expected to inherit. My daughter-in-law, who saw human beings as line items on a budget. The board meeting starts in 4 hours, I said quietly. Good, Stephanie replied. Because I want to present this restructuring plan to the board members. Do you? Yes. They need to understand the changes that are coming. Changes. Necessary changes. Inevitable changes. I stood up. Stephanie, Brandon, I want you to understand something very clearly. They both looked at me expectantly. This board meeting will definitely involve changes. Excellent, Stephanie said, smiling for the first time all morning. But they might not be the changes you're expecting. Her smile faltered slightly. What do you mean? You'll find out at 2 p.m. Richard, as future owners of this company, we have a right to know what you're planning. Future owners. Yes, future owners. We'll see about that. I walked past them toward the door. Margaret will have the conference room ready. I suggest you bring legal representation. Legal representation? Brandon looked confused. Dad, what's going on? You'll find out in 4 hours. As I left them sitting in my office, I heard Stephanie whisper urgently to Brandon. What do you think he means by legal representation? I didn't hear Brandon's response, but I knew they'd find out soon enough. Because in 4 hours, 47 employees were about to become 47 owners, and 2 entitled family members were about to learn what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. At exactly 2 p.m., I walked into the conference room where everything would change. The mahogany tables seated 12, but today we had 14 people present. Margaret sat to my right with 3 manila folders. Stephen Johnson, our attorney, occupied the chair to my left with his leather briefcase open and legal documents arranged precisely in front of him. Around the table, all 5 board members, Tommy Wilson representing the floor supervisors, Aurora Martinez from shipping, Jake Thompson from quality control, and 2 other longtime employees I'd specifically requested to attend. At the far end sat Brandon and Stephanie, looking confident and prepared. Stephanie had her laptop open and her restructuring presentation ready. But what they didn't know was that everyone else in the room had received preliminary briefings over the past week. Everyone except them understood what was about to happen. Thank you all for coming, I began, standing at the head of the table. Today we're making decisions that will affect the future of Taylor Manufacturing and everyone who works here. Stephanie immediately spoke up. Richard, I'd like to present the restructuring plan we discussed this morning. In a moment, I said calmly. First, I have some announcements. I nodded to Margaret, who opened the first manila folder. For the past 2 years, I continued, Margaret Brown and I have been working with Stephen Johnson to develop a comprehensive succession plan for this company. Brandon looked confused. Succession plan? Dad, we thought you'd just leave the business to family. I am leaving it to family, I said. To the family that actually built it. Stephanie's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? Stephen Johnson cleared his throat. Mr. Taylor has executed the legal transfer of 75% ownership to qualified employees through an employee stock ownership plan. The silence in the room was deafening. Effective immediately, Stephen continued, every employee with more than 2 years of tenure becomes a shareholder in Taylor Manufacturing. Tommy Wilson's jaw dropped. Aurora Martinez stared at me in shock. Jake Thompson looked like he'd been struck by lightning, but Stephanie's face turned white, then red, then white again. That's impossible, she said. You can't just give away a business. I'm not giving it away, I replied. I'm transferring ownership to the people who earned it. But Brandon is your son. Brandon is my son, but he's never worked a day in this factory. He's never met a production deadline. He's never solved a customer problem or trained a new employee. Margaret opened the second folder. The documentation is complete and legally binding. Each employee's share is calculated based on tenure and performance metrics. She handed Tommy a document. Mr. Wilson, your ownership stake is valued at approximately $180,000. Tommy stared at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. Aurora received her document next. Miss Martinez, your shares are worth $160,000. Jake Thompson's hands were shaking as he read his paperwork. $140,000. Each employee around the table received their ownership documentation. The numbers were staggering. Combined, they now owned $3.6 million in company assets. Brandon found his voice. Dad, this is insane. You're giving millions of dollars to employees? I'm giving millions of dollars to owners, I corrected, because that's what they are now. Owners. Stephanie stood up so fast her chair rolled backward. This is a mistake, a huge mistake. You're making emotional decisions because you're grieving. Am I? Yes. You're giving away Brandon's inheritance. Brandon's inheritance was never guaranteed. He's your son. And these people are my partners, have been for years, even if they didn't know it. Stephen Johnson opened his briefcase. The legal structure is ironclad. All documentation has been reviewed and approved. The transfer is immediate and irreversible. Irreversible? Stephanie's voice cracked. Completely. But what about family? What about blood relations? What about loyalty to your own son? I looked at her calmly. Stephanie, yesterday you called these people unnecessary. You wanted to eliminate their jobs to increase profits. You suggested replacing 47 experienced workers with machines. That's business. No, that's greed. Tommy Wilson finally spoke. Mr. Taylor, I don't understand. We're really owners now. You're really owners now. All of us? Margaret answered. Every qualified employee, from the newest hire to the most senior supervisor. You all own pieces of this company. Aurora Martinez was crying. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep doing the excellent work you've always done, except now you're doing it for yourselves. Jake Thompson looked stunned. This means we can't be fired arbitrarily? This means you can't be fired at all, Stephen Johnson explained, unless the employee owners vote to terminate someone for cause. Stephanie slammed her laptop shut. This is theft. You're stealing Brandon's rightful inheritance. Brandon still inherits 25% of the company, I said, plus life insurance policies worth $400,000, plus the house and other assets. He's not walking away empty-handed. 25%? That's not controlling interest. No, it's not. How is he supposed to run the company with only 25%? He's not supposed to run the company. Then who is? I gestured around the table. They are. The people who actually know how to run it. Brandon looked devastated. Dad, I always assumed. You assumed wrong. Stephanie wasn't finished. This is elder abuse, financial manipulation. We'll contest this in court. Stephen Johnson smiled. Miss Taylor, I encourage you to try. The documentation is flawless. Mr. Taylor was psychologically evaluated by 3 independent physicians. His decision-making capacity is unquestionable. 3 physicians? Standard procedure for transfers of this magnitude, he explained. All 3 confirmed Mr. Taylor's complete mental competency. Margaret opened the third folder. We also have documentation of every conversation regarding company restructuring, including recordings of statements about employee disposability. Stephanie's face went pale. Recordings? Illinois is a one-party consent state, Stephen noted. Mr. Taylor was legally permitted to record all conversations in his private office. You recorded us? I documented threats to my employees' livelihoods, I said. And your recordings will be very helpful if you attempt legal challenges. Tommy Wilson stood up slowly. Mr. Taylor, can I ask you something? Anything? Why? Why did you do this? I looked around the table at faces I'd seen every day for years. People who'd celebrated my successes and supported me through tragedies. People who'd worked late nights and weekends not because they had to, but because they cared about what we'd built together. Because loyalty should be rewarded, I said. Because dedication should be recognized. Because the people who build something should own it. Aurora Martinez wiped her eyes. What happens now? Now you elect a board of directors from among yourselves. You make decisions about wages, benefits, profit distribution. You decide the company's future. What about day-to-day operations? Jake asked. Tommy becomes general manager. Aurora takes over administration. You promote from within, hire who you need, run things the way you think best. And you? Tommy asked. I'll be available for consultation if you want it, but this is your company now. Stephanie was frantically typing on her phone, probably calling lawyers. Letter. Stephen Johnson had spent 2 years making this bulletproof. Brandon finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Dad, I don't understand. I'm your son. Yes, you are, and I love you. But love doesn't mean enabling bad decisions. Bad decisions. Planning to fire people who've been loyal for decades. Treating employees like disposable assets. Caring more about profit margins than human dignity. But Stephanie was trying to help make the company more profitable. More profitable for who, Brandon? He couldn't answer that. The company was already profitable, I continued. $2.3 million in annual revenue, steady growth for 30 years, 0 debt. The only thing Stephanie wanted to change was who benefited from that profitability. Margaret addressed the new employee owners. You'll need to schedule another meeting this week to elect officers and establish procedures. Stephen can guide you through the legal requirements. This is insane, Stephanie muttered, but the fight was going out of her voice. Reality was setting in. No, I said, this is justice. Tommy Wilson stood and extended his hand. Mr. Taylor, I don't have words for this. You don't need words. Just keep building something worth owning. One by one, the employees shook my hand. Several were crying. Jake Thompson kept staring at his ownership documents like they might disappear. As the employee owners filed out, chattering excitedly about their new responsibilities, Brandon and Stephanie remained seated. Dad, Brandon said quietly, what am I supposed to tell people? My friends, Stephanie's family. They'll ask what happened to the inheritance. Tell them the truth. Tell them it went to the people who earned it. But how do I explain this? You don't explain it, son. You accept it. Stephanie finally spoke, her voice cold and controlled. This isn't over, Richard. Yes, it is. We'll find a way to challenge this. You're welcome to try, but Stephen assures me you'll spend more on legal fees than you could ever recover. She gathered her papers with sharp, angry movements. Come on, Brandon, we're leaving. Brandon hesitated. Dad, You what? I didn't know you felt this way about the business, about the employees. You never asked. Maybe we could talk sometime? About what you built here? I looked at my son, weak-willed, easily influenced, but not malicious at heart. Maybe we could. Really? Call me next week. We'll have lunch. Relief flooded his face. Okay, yes. I'd like that. Stephanie was already at the door. Brandon, are you coming or not? He looked between us, torn as always between competing loyalties. Go ahead, son. But remember, those employees you thought were disposable? They just became your business partners. After they left, Stephen Johnson packed his briefcase. Well, Richard, that went about as smoothly as these things ever do. Think they'll challenge it? Stephanie might try, but the documentation is solid, and frankly, she doesn't have the resources for a prolonged legal battle, especially not against employee owners who now have significant assets to defend. Margaret was organizing the remaining papers. The employees seem overwhelmed, but excited. They should be excited. They own something now. What about you? She asked. Any regrets? I looked around the conference room where I'd just transferred 30 years of my life's work to 47 people who'd helped me build it. None, I said. Not a single one. By Friday morning, the transformation was already visible. I arrived at the factory to find Tommy Wilson in my old office, sitting behind the desk with a stack of production reports and a coffee mug that read, World's Best Supervisor, a gift from his daughter last Christmas. Morning, Mr. Taylor, he said, standing up when he saw me. It's just Richard now, Tommy, and this is your office. Still feels strange. It'll feel normal soon enough. He gestured to the papers spread across the desk. Aurora and I have been going through the employee ownership documents, trying to understand what we're responsible for now. Everything, I said simply. That's what I was afraid of. I laughed. You've been running day-to-day operations for years, Tommy. The only difference now is that you don't need my approval for decisions. But what if we make mistakes? Then you'll fix them, like we always have. Aurora Martinez appeared in the doorway. Richard, do you have a minute? We need to discuss the transition procedures. What do you need to know? Everything. Payroll, vendor relationships, customer contracts, insurance policies. I've been handling shipping for 15 years, but I've never dealt with the business side. Margaret can help with that. She knows every detail of how this place operates. But Margaret works for us now. Margaret works with you now. There's a difference. Aurora looked overwhelmed. This is a lot of responsibility. It's responsibility you've already been handling. You just didn't realize it. The phone on Tommy's desk rang. He answered with the authority of someone who'd been making decisions for decades, even if he'd never had the official title. Taylor Manufacturing, Tommy Wilson speaking. A pause. Yes, that's correct. I'm the new general manager. Another pause. No, Mr. Taylor is still involved as a consultant, but the company is now employee-owned. I could hear excited chatter from the caller. News was spreading fast in our small industrial community. Yes, we're still taking orders, Tommy continued. Same quality, same reliability, same people, just a different ownership structure. He hung up and looked at me. That was Peterson Agricultural. They wanted to confirm we're still operating normally. And? I told them we're operating better than normal. Are we? Ask me in 6 months. Margaret knocked on the office doorframe. Sorry to interrupt, but we need to discuss the legal requirements for the first official board meeting. When? Tommy asked. Next Friday. All employee owners need to vote on officers and establish operating procedures. What kind of officers? President, vice president, secretary, treasurer, standard corporate structure. Tommy looked nervous. I don't know anything about being a president. You know everything about running this factory, I said. The title is just paperwork. But what if people vote for someone else? Then someone else becomes president. Democracy in action. Margaret spread out documents on the desk. Stephen Johnson will be here to guide you through the process, but essentially you'll be voting on who makes final decisions when the employee owners disagree about something. Do you think we'll disagree? Aurora asked. Probably, I said, but you'll work it out. You always have. Around lunchtime, I walked through the factory floor for what might be the last time as the owner. The atmosphere was electric. Employees were working with renewed energy, talking excitedly about their new status. Jake Thompson waved me over to the quality control station. Richard, I wanted to thank you for yesterday. Don't thank me. You earned it. No, I mean really. This changes everything for my family. How so? My wife can quit her night job at the hospital. We can pay off our house early. My kids can go to college without student loans. That's what ownership means, Jake. The profits stay with the people who create them. But what about you? Don't you need the money for retirement? I have everything I need. And watching you all succeed is worth more than any retirement account. Near the end of the day, Brandon called my cell phone. Dad, I've been thinking about yesterday. What about it? I owe you an apology. For what? For assuming I deserved something I never worked for not understanding what you built here. I was quiet for a moment, surprised by his honesty. I want to understand, he continued, about the business, about why you made the decision you made. Are you sure? Yes, I think I need to. What about Stephanie? Stephanie and I are taking a break. She's staying with her parents while we figure things out. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? I'm sorry you're hurting. I'm not sorry she's gone. Dad, son, I'll always love you. But I won't enable behavior that hurts good people. I know. I think I'm starting to understand that. Good. That's progress. So about that lunch. Sunday at noon, Miller's Diner. I'll be there. After he hung up, I sat in my truck in the parking lot, watching employees leave for the weekend. They walked differently now, stood straighter, talked more confidently. Tommy Wilson locked the front door, something he'd done 1,000 times before. But tonight he wasn't just securing someone else's business. He was protecting his own. Margaret tapped on my truck window. How does it feel? Different. Good different or bad different? Right different. Any regrets? I looked at the building where I'd spent 30 years of my life, where I'd built something meaningful with people who cared about excellence. Only one, I said. What's that? I should have done it sooner. 6 weeks later, the results were even better than I'd hoped. Tommy Wilson had been unanimously elected president of the employee-owned Taylor Manufacturing. Aurora Martinez became vice president in charge of operations. Jake Thompson took the treasurer position, managing the books with precision that impressed even Margaret. The financial impact was immediate and dramatic. Without Stephanie's optimization plans, the company continued its steady profitability. But now, instead of profits flowing to distant shareholders, they stayed with the people who generated them. Tommy bought a new house, his first with a 2-car garage and a yard big enough for his kids to play in. The down payment came from his ownership dividends, earned from his own hard work. Aurora Martinez enrolled in business management classes at the community college. "If I'm going to help run this place," she told me, "I want to do it right." The company paid her tuition through a new education benefit the employee owners had voted to implement. Jake Thompson's wife quit her night shift at the hospital. Their teenage son, inspired by the manufacturing environment, started an apprenticeship program with our machinist team. 3 generations learning the same trade in the same building. But the consequences extended beyond our employees. Word spread quickly through the industrial community about what we'd done. Within a month, I received calls from business owners in neighboring towns asking about employee ownership structures. Stephen Johnson started getting referrals for similar succession planning. The local newspaper ran a feature story. Family business chooses employees over blood relations. The article mentioned Taylor Manufacturing's 30-year track record, our low turnover rate, and the innovative ownership transfer that kept jobs local. Not everyone approved. Stephanie's parents publicly criticized my decision, calling it financial irresponsibility and a betrayal of family values. They threatened to sue for undue influence over Brandon's inheritance. Stephen Johnson sent them a polite letter explaining the legal impossibility of their position. They never filed suit. Stephanie herself had moved back to her hometown, telling anyone who'd listen that I'd stolen her family's rightful inheritance. The story she told painted me as a confused elderly man manipulated by greedy employees. But actions speak louder than words. Taylor Manufacturing's productivity increased 12% in the first quarter under employee ownership. Customer satisfaction scores reached all-time highs. We landed 3 new contracts, including one with a Fortune 500 agricultural equipment manufacturer. The employee owners invested profits back into the business. They purchased new equipment, upgraded the facility's safety systems, and implemented an apprenticeship program for local high school students. More importantly, they maintained the company culture that had made us successful for 30 years. The profit-sharing program was expanded, healthcare benefits were enhanced, the scholarship fund for employees' children was tripled. Brandon and I had lunch every Sunday for 6 weeks running. Slowly, he began to understand what I'd built and why I'd transferred it to the employees. "I never realized how much thought went into every decision," he admitted during our 4th lunch. "I assumed running a business was just about maximizing profits." "Maximizing profits for who?" I asked. "That's what I never understood. I thought the answer was obvious." "And now?" "Now I think the answer is complicated." "Not complicated, just different than what you assumed." By the 8th week, Brandon had asked Tommy Wilson if he could spend a day working on the factory floor. Not as an owner or supervisor, but as a temporary employee learning how things actually worked. Tommy agreed, but with conditions. "You start at 6 a.m., you follow safety protocols, you take direction from whoever I assign you to. No special treatment because you're Richard's son." "Fair enough," Brandon said. He lasted 3 days before admitting he'd never worked so hard in his life. But he also said he'd never felt so connected to the actual creation of something useful. "These people aren't just employees," he told me at Sunday lunch. "They're craftsmen, always have been. Why didn't I see that before? Because you weren't looking." The most unexpected consequence came from an unlikely source. 3 months after the ownership transfer, Stephanie called my house. "Richard, it's Stephanie." "Hello, Stephanie." I need to." She struggled with the words. "I think I owe you an apology." "Do you?" "My parents have been talking to lawyers for weeks, trying to find a way to challenge your decision." And every lawyer tells them the same thing. What you did was completely legal and probably the smartest business decision you could have made." "I see." "The company's value has increased 23% since the ownership transfer. If Brandon had inherited the whole business and implemented my restructuring plan, it would probably be worth less than when you transferred it." "Probably." I was wrong. About what? About thinking employees were disposable. About thinking loyalty didn't matter. About thinking business was just about maximizing short-term profits. I waited for her to continue. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, "but I wanted you to know that I understand now why you made the choice you made." "Thank you for saying that." Is there any chance for us?" "That's between you and Brandon." "But if you had to guess?" I thought about my son, who was spending his Saturdays learning industrial processes and his Sundays discussing business ethics. "I think Brandon is becoming the man I always hoped he'd be," I said. "Whether that's compatible with the woman you're becoming is up to both of you to figure out." She hung up without saying goodbye. But 2 weeks later, I saw them having coffee together at Miller's Diner, talking quietly, seriously, like adults working through difficult questions. Maybe some good would come from all the pain after all. Today marks 6 months since the ownership transfer, and I'm sitting in what used to be my office, watching Tommy Wilson conduct a board meeting with the confidence of someone who was born to lead. The transformation is complete. Taylor Manufacturing is thriving under employee ownership. Revenue is up 18%. We've hired 6 new people. The waiting list for job applications is 3 months long. But the real success isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in Tommy Wilson's daughter starting her engineering internship here next summer, in Aurora Martinez's promotion to operations director, in Jake Thompson's son choosing manufacturing over college because he wants to learn a trade that builds things people need. It's measured in 47 families who own something meaningful instead of just working for someone else's dream. Brandon stops by every Friday now, not as the owner's son, but as someone genuinely interested in understanding what his father built. He's considering leaving his corporate job to join the company as a regular employee. Would I have to start at the bottom? He asked me last week. Everyone starts at the bottom, Tommy told him. Even owners. Especially owners, Aurora added. He's thinking about it. As for me, I've learned something important about legacy. You don't create a legacy by keeping control. You create it by giving control to people who will build something better than you ever could alone. Marie would have loved seeing this. She always said our employees were the real treasure of this business. Now they know it too. I still come in most mornings, but not because I have to. Because I want to watch something beautiful continue growing. The employee owners ask my opinion occasionally, but they make their own decisions, and their decisions are excellent. My new boundaries are simple. I'm available when asked, invisible when not needed, and supportive always. The business I built with Marie belongs to the people who helped us build it. They're writing the next chapter of its story, and I couldn't be prouder of what they're creating. Sometimes the best thing you can do for something you love is let it go to people who love it as much as you do. That's not loss. That's multiplication. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what you think about second chances, for businesses, for relationships, and for people who need to learn the difference between entitlement and earning. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no to the people you love most.